Hey, AP Psych students, it's Mrs. Sewell with a Unit 7 personality review. So let's get started. First thing is Standard 1. This is where you have to know all the approaches to personality and, of course, trait theory. It's pretty lengthy, and it's 20 questions on your test, okay? We start with Freud. Freud is, big on personality. He's the first one to really look at personality. His approach is called the psychoanalytic approach. He's the only one in the psychoanalytic approach. So he's the only name. All right. You want to know the difference between your id, ego, superego. There will definitely be questions on that. The id is that immediate gratification. It's your basic drives. It's all in your unconscious. And so it's, I want this and I want it now. Feed me now, those kinds of things. Then you've got the superego, which is like your good conscience. That's the moral principle. That's where you've internalized, all the things your parents and teachers have told you, do the right thing, those kind of things. And don't worry that it's at the preconscious. I don't think you need to know that or have to worry about that too much. Then you've got your ego. Ego is the reality principle, and it's always trying to weigh the demands of the id versus the what would you call it? I guess it says inhibitions of the superego. So it's, just trying to navigate a path between those two demands. All right. As far as his psychosexual stages, he believes that your childhood is the root of your personality. So, and your unconscious, what's in your unconscious. So he believes that's where your personality comes from, and your personality is formed during those psychosexual stages. Know that if something goes wrong in a stage, you develop a fixation. So if something goes wrong in the oral stage, that's, when you're weaning, so off the breast or off the bottle, then you could develop, smoking habits or overeating, those kind of things. And then if it's during the toilet training phase, which is the anal phase, then you could become overly orderly or overly messy. Again, that's the fixation. So know those kind of things. Those two, probably not a huge amount on that. Know what the libido is. That's your sex drive. He believes that the libido drives in the unconscious, or, what's making all this happen. Also, make sure you know what the Oedipus complex is, and that's just where Freud's belief, and again, nobody else uses it, that boys fall in love with their mother and then they become a rival and, even want to kill their father. So eliminate, that sounds better, right? So that you want to know those things in general. The biggest thing about Freud is defense mechanisms. Again, there's research that support this. We talked about terror management theory. So you got to know these defense mechanisms. There's a ton of questions in the test bank on defense mechanisms, so you want to go through it. This is something I found for you that gives some examples of specific situation where there's a 16-year-old that gets cut from the soccer team, and how would they act in that situation. I think it's super helpful. So regression is where you go back to essentially an infantile state. So if you see thumb sucking, bedwetting, throwing a tantrum. Here, I thought this was kind of cute that he got cut from the soccer team, so he goes to grandma's and eats cookies. So, he goes back to, that looking for that comfort. All right. Reaction formation, always on the test. That is where you act the opposite of how you feel. So you form the opposite reaction of your feelings. And so on this one, if the kid gets cut, he then, was like, well, I don't care. That team is stupid. And they're all a bunch of losers, something like that. And so, even though he really wanted to be on the team, so he acts the opposite of how he feels. Projection is where you take your feelings and you put them onto someone else. So if he gets cut from the soccer team, then he's, talking, well, my parents are so mad about this and they're going to get this coach kind of thing. So he's projecting his feelings onto his parents when, maybe his parents are going to say, well, try something else. Rationalization, this is the one we all use in many instances. And that's just where you justify it. You make it less threatening, I guess. So if he's rationalizing being cut from the soccer team, well, he didn't practice that much and he didn't work that hard. If he had, he would have made it. I always think of rationalization, like if you cheat on a test, then you are, you don't want to feel bad. You don't want your super ego to feel bad because you cheated on the test. And so you will say, well, it's because that teacher's so bad. I didn't have a choice, or that test was so hard, it's ridiculous, or everybody is cheating on that test. So that's a rationalization. Displacement and sublimation are the ones that students get confused, and you really got to know the difference. Displacement means to move something. So if you displace it, you move it. So you have angry, kind of hostile, negative emotions, and that makes you feel bad, right? And so you have to shift those from their original source, the thing that made you mad, to something else, something less threatening. So if I'm mad at my parents, maybe I punch the wall because I can't punch my parents, or I kick the dog. Don't kick the dog. And so that's displacement. Here, if he gets cut from the soccer team, he yells at his little brother. He's not mad at his little brother. He's angry because he got cut, and he displaces that anger at his brother. He moves that anger. And then the other one, sublimation. It's kind of the idea that you have negative, hostile, aggressive emotion that, that hurts your superego and your ego. So you're trying to protect it. So, but you, instead of shifting that same negative energy to something else, you turn it into something good or something acceptable. And so instead of punching your brother with sublimation, like you would in displacement, with sublimation, you channel it into something positive. So here he gets cut from the soccer team, but then he joins cross country. I always think I'm a rage cleaner. If I get really mad at my husband, then I just start cleaning the house. Like I'm just scrubbing, cleaning toilets. So, instead of, channeling that anger at my husband, I make it into something productive. That's a sublimation, okay? Those words don't tell you, displacement does, but sublimation doesn't. So sublimation, reaction formation, be sure you know them, definitely will be on your test. And then denial, that's just when you refuse to believe something. That's probably pretty easy. So this kid, if he gets cut from the soccer team, he's just certain that, there's something wrong with the list. His name must have been left off. There's no way he would have been cut, and he's going to go talk to the coach and get that taken care of. Great practice for you. Hopefully you did it before. It's still really good to do before the test. Go to Socrative, and the room is defense, and do those practice problems. Do them again, even if you did them, and read the feedback. That'll help you. Again, huge amount of questions on defense mechanisms, so make sure you know those. All right, so you've got Freud all alone in psychoanalytic, but the NEOFREUDIANS create then the psychodynamic approach. I always call it Freud light. Just take out the libido and those drives and all the sex parts, all right? And then you get the Neo-Freudian. They still believe in the unconscious. They still believe that your childhood plays a huge part in your personality. So you start with Carl Jung. He believes in the collective unconscious. So he believes you have a personal unconscious. So that's the one, that Freud believes in. But he also believes there's a collective unconscious, and that is that one that is shared, essentially, with all humanity, and that within that collective unconscious are archetypes. And so we talked about the shadow. That's like the characters. You see them universally, like in The Lion King, and that's an African story. You see Scar, and you see Darth Vader in the Star Wars movie, and then you've got Voldemort and Harry Potter, but you can see those across cultures, and we all recognize that. Same with the hero, when we watch a video about that. And that he believes we have personality types, and we tend to identify with one of these archetypes. And so there's a whole bunch of them. You don't have to know the particular archetypes. You just need to know that collective unconscious and archetypes go with Jung. Know what an archetype is. He also coins the term introvert and extrovert. The Myers-Briggs test rely a lot, or based a lot, on Jung theories. You got to know Karen Horney. She's on there, definitely. You'll get a Horney question. Womb envy is usually the one that comes up. She went counter to Freud's idea that women have penis envy and said no, men have womb envy. They want to be able to have children and control us in having children. Also, make a note that she also believed your personality was based on social interactions. For her, it was between the parents and the child. So your personality is a lot to do with your relationship with your parents. She believed that basic anxiety and neuroses, so being neurotic, come from, not getting enough attention or, not having your needs met as a child. So that is a social interaction. Alfred Adler also believed that social interaction was important in forming personality. Now, again, that's distinct from Freud, but his was more the family dynamic instead of just parents. Remember, he's the birth order theory, that your personality is based on your birth order. He also gives us the idea of inferiority complex. So you should be able to identify that Adler goes with inferiority complex and birth order, and that it's personality social interactions. Erik Erikson, if you see anything about identity crisis, that's going to be Erikson. We'll learn more about him later. Let's see, just remember, NEOFREUDIANS are psychodynamic, and they just take the sex part out of Freud, and that should get you where you need to be. All right, humanistic approach to personality. Abraham Maslow in the hierarchy of needs, you want to know those levels of needs. So know physiological, safety, love and belonging, and esteem, but especially know self-actualization. That is where you meet your full potential. He believed that you're driven to reach self-actualization, and that how you maneuver through these levels of the hierarchy is how your personality develops. Then his counterpart, Carl Rogers. If you see unconditional positive regard, it's going to be Carl Rogers. He believed we all need unconditional positive regard, especially from our parents, so that they, give us love and support and let us try things. He didn't believe in permissive parenting, but that he let us try things and, find our way, things like that. He's also all about the self, the idea of your self-concept and yourself. Remember, that's how you answer the question, who am I? He looked at the ideal self versus the real self. So if you see those, that's a Carl Rogers things. And I'm trying to think, there's a bunch of other selves, but they're on another slide, so we'll talk about those. But Carl Rogers, if it's about self, and he believed that, again, he believed in the hierarchy and that, but you need, in order to reach self-actualization, you needed these things: unconditional positive regard. You needed a good self-image, that overlap between the real self and the ideal self. So that's how he believed your personality was forming. All right, behavior approach. We didn't really talk a lot about this. Just know that behavior, it's always going to be Skinner and Watson. And anytime it's a behavior question, so across the board in any unit we do, behaviorists believe that everything you do and everything that you are, including your personality, is because you learned it in your environment. They believe in environmental determinism. Your environment and the learning within that environment determines your personality and everything else about you. So your personality is what you have learned through reinforcement and punishment. And so, the nice thing about it is, unlike Freud, they believe your personality can change because you can learn new personality. All right, it's not set in your childhood. So you won't see a lot on there, but there is a question or two. Then you get to social cognitive theory with Bandura. All right, the big thing here is reciprocal determinism. And so he believed that your personal factors, that's your traits, and your environment and your behavior all work together. Social cognitive is the idea of social learning, and cognitive is cognition, that's thinking. And so there are cognitions, we're aware of it. Okay, so no reciprocal determinism is that combination of personal factors or traits, environment, and behavior, definitely on there. No self-efficacy. There are a few questions on self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the idea that you have an ability to do something and that your efforts matter. So that's self-efficacy. And so you have this confidence in your ability to perform a task or a skill, as it says there, and you can accomplish things. So again, your efforts will be effective, self-efficacy. And then the humanist concepts, self-esteem, right? The esteem is one of the levels. That is, how much you value yourself or how worthy you see yourself. Self-concept, that's, how we view ourselves, our self-image and all those kinds of things. And don't forget self-serving bias, and that's our tendency to attribute our success to dispositional factors versus situational factors, to traits than to the situation. So self-serving bias, like if you guys all passed the AP exam, Miss Mailer and I are like, yay, that was us. We did that. We created a great curriculum. But if you all fail, Miss Mailer and I would be like, oh, well, if they'd studied, it wasn't us. So it wasn't us, it was them kind of thing. Also, learned helplessness kind of comes in with social cognitive, that